Well, hi, everyone. I'm sitting here in my den and at long last ready for a wonderful fireside chat with you, long overdue, but this is the first time I've been able to do it. To get to it, this is probably one of the most important tapes I've done in a long time, and I'm looking forward to having a really great visit, a really wonderful fireside chat with you right here in my den on a beautiful, very cool Southern California day. Now, this tape will probably be more of a newsy type of tape than it will a message necessarily, because there's so much to share with you, and I want to use my allotted space to bring you up to speed on everything and the great changes that are taking place, and to give you some things to pray about, because this is a time of great change both in ministry and in my personal life, and I do really need your prayers and your help in a big way. So kind of settle in and get ready for a real visit, because, as I say, this is probably one of the most important tapes I've done in a long time. As you've noticed, this is titled "The Golden Sabbath" or Golden Jubilee, which mean the same thing. And in fact, in Ezekiel, the 46th chapter and verse 17, it's referred to also as the year of liberty. Now, in the book of Leviticus are some very famous words in Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. I believe those are the very words that are on our Liberty Bell. Claim liberty throughout all the land to all the inhabitants thereof. Now, you know the Jews had, of course, every seventh day was Sabbath. I'm not talking about that, basically, the day of rest. Wonderful theme of Sabbath rest, which is brought over into the New Testament and the great teaching of the Epistle of the Hebrews, which you've often heard me talk about. There remaineth a rest unto the people of God. He that would enter into his rest must cease from his own works as God did from his. And that's, of course, in the fourth chapter of Hebrews, but that's not my purpose right now. The Jews had their seventh day every week as a day of rest, which they still observed, and it was called Sabbath. But they also had a sabbatic year, or a jubilee, or a golden jubilee year, a golden Sabbath, which came in the 50th year. And that's what we're reading about here in Leviticus, the 25th chapter, and verse 10. And ye shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you. And ye shall return every man into his possession, and ye shall return every man into his family. A jubilee shall that 50th year be unto you, and you will not sow or reap that which grows of itself in it, nor gather the grapes of it of the vine undressed. For it is jubilee, and it will be holy unto you, and you will eat the increase thereof out of the field. And in the year of this jubilee you will return every man unto his possession. Now imagine that everyone in a lifetime could look forward to a year off, and to a year of liberty, as it's referred to in Ezekiel chapter 46 and verse 17, when even though they had been indentured servants or slaves, they were liberated and sent back to their inheritance, and everyone got his inheritance back. So there was always a new, fresh start to be looked for, at least at some time in your life, in the 49th, right after the 49th and the 50th year. And that's what Leviticus is referring to, a year of liberty. And that's why I have titled this tape, The Golden Sabbath or the Golden Jubilee, because that's exactly what I want to share with you about my plans and what's happened to me. Now, you probably wondered, even though you've recently received a letter, those of you in the Inner Circle friends and also to the general mailing list, what had happened to me and where I've been and what had happened to the tapes, because you certainly hadn't heard much from me lately. And I want to explain once again briefly, even though we just sent out the letter, that it has been utterly impossible for me to get anything done for a number of months. And I'm going to tell you the story of why, and it's a very serious story of a very vicious satanic attack, but which I believe God is now lifting and getting the victory over, and I'm beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. But if ever I needed your prayers, I need them now, and I thank those of you who have been faithfully praying. So, as the scriptures say, gird up the loins of your mind, put on your spiritual armor, as described in Ephesians 6:10-18, and help me stand against the wiles of the devil. You probably also noticed that while I didn't do a spring itinerary, that here it is getting late in the fall, and I'm not doing a fall one either, which is exactly the way the Lord led me, although I will say that I certainly do miss seeing you folk back east. I'll tell you that. I sure miss seeing my beloved friends. I have always looked forward to my travels and to the great meetings we've had in so many places with so many of you. But this has not been a year when I've been able to do either the spring or the fall itinerary, and I want you to know why that has been. Now, as the time drew near, in later summer, for me to plan the fall itinerary and start making phone calls to those of you who host the meetings, I frequently have good visits with Nancy over a few hundred miles. She's up there in Cody, Wyoming, and I'm here in Bakersfield, California. And I had one of those visits in which I told her that I just seemed paralyzed and powerless to get underway in the itinerary. And she said that she had been praying about that and that the Lord had spoken to her heart to suggest to me that I not do this fall itinerary. And I have to honestly tell you that when she mentioned that first time to me on the phone last summer, it didn't set well with me in the sense that I love my itinerary so much that I really wanted to come back east this fall. But I told her I sure would pray about it and ask her to pray with me, which she did. And almost immediately thereafter, I had 3 warning dreams telling me very definitely that I should not come back east this fall. That has not happened in a long, long time, but God made crystal clear to me that he did not want me to come back east this fall. And so that gave me peace that I at least knew the plan of God, and I just did not have the energy um, to plan the itinerary anyway. So subsequently, God told me he reminded me, this is your 50th year. Had Trudy lived, it would have been your golden anniversary on the 18th of August. Of course, she died 12 years ago back in 1988. But he said it would have been your 50th year of marriage to Trudy. And he said, be reminded that you were ordained in 1950 at Grace Baptist Church in Binghamton, New York, and this is your 50th year officially in ministry. And he says, you are more than deserving of a golden Sabbath, a golden jubilee, a year of liberty. And he said, I want you to take that year of liberty. It's absolutely essential. As I said, this will probably be more of a newsy tape maybe than a teaching tape, but I'm sharing my heart with you here. And I sure thank God that I've got you wonderful folk as my extended family. I just think we've got the greatest family imaginable, and that we're very important to God, and that the Lord wants to bless us together. And I hasten to say this, I do not think that this is the end, that I'm going to stay out here in the West and never come back east. And I want to stick that in right here and now, because I believe God will enable me to come back there. As a matter of fact, through a generous gift from my daughter-in-law and son and family back in Providence, Rhode Island, I will fly back for Thanksgiving to be with Vance and Jeannie and Justin, and I don't know whether Caleb, my older grandson, will make it back from Colorado for that gathering or not, but thank God my brother Don, who's 4.5 years younger than I am, will come down and join us and celebrate Thanksgiving and have several days together with us. So I will fly back east, but it'll be a pleasure trip and a very nice, restful time with the family, and I just thank God for Jeannie and Vance and family and for their generosity in making that trip possible. because I sure couldn't afford it myself right now. Now, this is probably a good time to stick in this word too that God made clear to me when he told me to take this sabbatic year, and I'm going into that in greater depth in just a moment here, but he also told me not to plan a spring itinerary in the year 2001. That's next spring, which is coming on fast now, believe it or not. The holidays will soon sweep by us, and we'll be into the year 2001 in the goodness of the Lord, but I won't be coming back east then either. But I do hope that I'll be able to come back in the fall of 2001, and I'll be telling you about possible format changes in ministry and that kind of thing, because I want to go into this in depth. I've been under a very serious satanic attack, which I now believe is ending. But believe me, don't take that for granted. I need your prayers badly now. Now, you know that the scripture categorizes, especially John taught, that we are first children spiritually, and then young men, and then spiritual fathers. Well, for some time I have been a spiritual father, as most of you know, and we have as our father Abraham. And I want to refer to Genesis, the 15th chapter, which you might like to read the whole chapter. But it says in the 15th chapter that Abraham had a vision. And Abraham said to the Lord, "What will you give me, seeing that I go childless," and so on. And then he made a sacrifice with a heifer, a she-goat, a ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he divided the sacrifices according to Genesis chapter 15. And birds came and down on the carcasses, so that Abraham had to drive them away. There's a very interesting verse in Genesis 15:12 that says, when the sun was going down, in other words, night and darkness was falling on him, a deep sleep, get that please, fell upon Abram. When the sun was going down, Genesis 15:12, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. That's probably a verse that describes about as much as anything the experience that I had beginning in early summer, when I found myself totally without energy, spiritually, mentally, or physically. Even though I had no physical symptoms that were apparent, I just had no energy to do anything at all. I couldn't get tapes out. I couldn't handle correspondence, telephone calls, my usual office work. Those of you who know me know that I've always been a very disciplined person, and that I would, for example, sit down over the many years of my ministry at the beginning of the month and plot my month and my responsibilities and my objectives and goals. And at the end of the month, most of those objectives and goals had been achieved. And not only did I plan it for the month, I would have a review day at the end of the week, planning the next week and seeing what I had accomplished the preceding week. And I'd always operated that way. Now, there are changes that come to us as we get older psychologically, and we have to learn to incorporate the transcendent function, and I've done some talking about that in my teaching in recent days. But then there are some major changes that we can't anticipate, and here was Abraham standing at a critical crossroads as a spiritual giant, a spiritual father in his experience, and he had the same experience that Moses had later on in Exodus 20:21, where Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. So it reads, and I'll repeat, in Genesis 15:12, as Abraham has sacrifices divided and he's communing with God, while the sun was going down, in other words, deepening darkness, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. Remember the deep sleep. And lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. So this is a time of darkness and sleep and unconsciousness. And why is that? Because it's going to be revealed, Abraham, that his posterity will go down into bondage for 400 years, and God is going to reveal prophetically the experience of the children of Israel to the spiritual father. Now, God's given me an important assignment in the body of Christ, and when something new is to be born, many times we sink into a deep sleep and horror of great darkness, as did Abraham and Moses, or as Jesus sunk into the tomb. and we go through a deeper than usual death. And that's why Paul says in Ephesians 5:14, whatsoever makes 5:13 rather, whatsoever makes manifest, whatever is lights things up, whatever makes manifest is light. And Jesus said, you don't bring a candle, put it under a bushel, you bring it to show what's in the room to light up the room. And Paul says, whatsoever makes manifest is light. And then in 5:14 of Ephesians, he says, awake, thou that sleepest, and rise from the dead, and Christ will give you life and light. Because life and light are one and the same thing. In him was life, L-I-F-E, and his life, L-I-F-E, was the light, L-I-G-H-T, of men. In other words, the life of God is the light of men. But when something new is being born, you always sink down in death. And this is a new phase of my ministry, which I'll talk more extensively about as we go on in this fireside chat. And something new is to be born. And that's why the great medieval mystic who lived back in the 1500s that has had such an impact on Western mysticism and, for that matter, the whole of Western thought development, Jacob Burma, the shoe cobbler, who had such great visions of God, that's why he said, consider sleep, and so shall you have it all. I'll tell you, it's a source of blessing and mystification to me that a man like Nicolescu, who's one of the top physicists in the whole world, would, in his book, Science, Meaning, and Evolution, uh, give me that wonderful quote that I've just given to you from Jacob Burma or Jacob Bohm. Consider sleep, and so shall you have it all. Now, sleep is part of the seed of the birth of new things. A sleep rather, that lasts a lifetime is a total tragedy. If you never wake up and find out what the meaning of the darkness and the unconsciousness is, that's terrible. But I'm beginning to find out what the meaning is now, and that's what I want to share with you so that you can, in turn, pray fervently with me for the full realization of God's plan and God's promises. Now, as I said, early in the summer with no notable physical symptoms, and I might pause as a little aside and say to you that in this year of liberty, or this Jubilee year, it is my full intention, as soon as I can, and I've had this on the agenda for a long time, been unable to get this done. But many of you have asked, have you had your physical exams? No, I have not. And I still do not have any physical symptoms to speak of at all, except, of course, my usual angina, which is controllable and doesn't give me too much trouble. But at 70 years of age, I must, after a matter of a few years not having my exams, get back and see the cardiologist and have a general physical exam and the rest of it. And that I intend to do as soon as we are able to through holidays and into the new year. That's part of the year of liberty. That's part of my golden Sabbath. That's definitely on the agenda, and now I'll have time to get that kind of thing done. I wanted you to know that because many of you, when I'm either communicating with you by letter or on the phone, you ask me whether I've had that done, like faithful friends who remind the delinquents. And I confess to you, I have been delinquent, but I have not been able to get them done. But by the grace of God, I will in the next few months. So just stand with me in prayer. Now, I have a dear friend that I've mentioned before in San Francisco, an engineer who came out from New Jersey, and I've known him for years, and I have a profound respect for the prophetic gift that God has given him. God's put him in a strategic place in the body of Christ, and he's been a very great blessing to me from time to time. And I would remind you that, as the Celestine prophecy says, the universe is energy. Please never forget this wonderful, inspired truth, that the universe is energy, and that when we have a need, the universe, which is energy, sends people with the answers. Well, here I was back early in the summer and wondering why here I'd had a long track record of being very disciplined in my office work and ministry and getting tapes out at least somewhere near on time and handling my correspondence and the rest of it, and I had no energy to do any of it, couldn't even get normal, regular, everyday household tasks done, which mystified me. Now, if I'd been desperately ill, it'd have been one thing, but no energy whatsoever was the whole experience. Now, I hold in my hand a letter, which I'm going to share parts of with you, which says this from my friend in San Francisco. I had an unusual dream, and he had it early in the summer. Uh, it was a day that I made a business trip to Los Angeles. And then he goes on to say that he pondered this dream for quite a while afterward, and I did not. That was early in the summer when he had the dream. I didn't get it until late in the summer, and I was delighted and ready to receive it when I finally got this dear friend's dream. And I'm going to pretty much read his letter verbatim here. Uh, he says, I'll relate the dream and the waking impression as I wrote it down. I find myself in a struggle on behalf of an older, gray-bearded priest. This conflict was instigated by the priest's decision to leave the priesthood. Now listen as carefully as you can. I'll try and explain it as carefully as I can. To leave the priesthood and to live as a hermit, or as Thomas Merton would say, as one of God's solitaires, which has been my calling these last 3 years, as you know. It seems, he goes on to say, that the devil attacked the priest to kill him because of his decision to leave the priesthood. He says, I was called back to a stone cabin. This is all in the dream. As I was departing, and this is how I became involved in the conflict. And in this stone cabin, I saw a picture on a dresser of this priest. It looked like Bruce. The picture was, get this, was fading because it was depicting that life was being drained out of the priest. Now I'm going to pause and interject. Imagine here this man was seeing in a dream what I was experiencing. No energy whatsoever to get even the common, ordinary, everyday task done, to say nothing of the ministry task that I'd taken care of for 50 years. And he saw the devil attacking me to drain the life out of me. And he saw me in a picture on the dresser. That's how he knew it was me. And he goes on to say, as I looked at the photo of the priest, I immediately understood the situation and the reason for it. I responded by standing up against the devil. And for a second, my life was in the same jeopardy as the priest. But then the attack broke, and the priest came to life and stood in front of me, dressed in magician's robes like Merlin. And then he continues, as we walked out of the stone cabin together, he explained his reasons and decision to leave the priesthood. The interior of the cabin looked very much like the inside of Bruce's apartment. Now, this dear friend has been down from San Francisco and been in my apartment. That's how he knew what it looked like. Everybody likes to come into my apartment. I've collected artifacts and little things from all over the country in my travels for many years, and I love to be an interior decorator, maybe a frustrated interior decorator, but I love my place, and everybody else loves to come and look at it. My brother, where I'm sitting right here in the den having a fireside chat with you, my blood brother, Don, the one who's 4.5 years younger, my only brother, was out here on a visit many months ago and came into my den, and he said, I mean, this is a high compliment. This place looks like a museum. So I do love my place, and I have a very nice place to stay here. As I sit talking with you, I'm looking out over my balcony into the leaves, which actually color up here in California. We don't get eastern beautiful foliage, and here it is, I'm doing this in double-digit November, the 10th, the first day that we've had, two numbers in November, early November, or mid-November, I guess you'd call this. And there's lots and lots of green out there, but interspersed among them, some pretty rusty leaves and yellows and reds and different things. So even California gets some fall foliage. And I'm going to share some of the rest of this letter with you before I comment. He goes on to say about my beloved Trudy. Was Trudy a strong object of affection to Bruce? God tore her away in due course of time, and not contrary to her will, from Bruce in response to his desire and prayer to know God intimately. This set Bruce's heart free, follow God. And then he makes this very valid observation. Bruce And I really laughed when I read this. You feel many times like extending to God the middle finger of your right hand as a gesture of worship. But many more times you want to thank God for answering your heart's plea. And that is true on both counts. It ain't easy. And he's telling the truth there on both counts. And he concludes by saying, the ex-priest, now a magician, set out to walk with God moment by moment. His every daily moment was preoccupied with God, and no anxious moments were found. And then in parenthesis, but it was not a stroll along a rosy path. And I put a little editorial comment. In fact, I marked this letter up beyond belief. Damn right. It is not an easy stroll along Primrose Path, that's for sure. Of course, I, excuse me, went on to not once, but I think several times, I could honestly say, as we had subsequent phone visits, um, quiz this man upside down, inside out, and through about the various intimations and meanings of this dream. I said, what do you mean that I, for example, quit the priesthood? I still am preaching Melchizedek priesthood. But it became crystal clear that it's a change in emphasis as he saw me standing before him dressed in magician's robes like Merlin. Now, the other night I watched again, and I had not watched it for a long time, John Boorman's tremendous production, Excalibur. And it is a masterpiece, and I strongly recommend that you get it and look at it and let the Spirit of God speak to you through the symbology of that marvelous movie, Excalibur, by John Boorman. Get the right one. And as I watched that again, I realized, and you'll see in the movie, much that I'm talking about on this tape, about the changed emphasis it came, not only in King Arthur's life, but especially in this mystical man who was behind the scenes, Merlin the magician. Now, I want to emphasize again and underline that he saw me no longer dressed as I recovered from the devil's attack and my energy came back. He saw me dressed in magician's robes like Merlin. I want to say quite a bit about that in just a few moments. But what became crystal clear to me as I pondered it more and more is that he said you were still a priest, but somehow the persona had changed. The clothing in a dream many times will symbolize your public function, your persona, the face you put out toward society. And the priest is identified as an official religious figure, identified with the Church of Jesus Christ, as a priest of Christ. And he has regular duties that he must take care of, just as I have had all my life, and very heavy office work, as a matter of fact, and travels and lecture program and tape responsibilities and the rest of it. And what this means is that I'm putting forth a new face, which means I'll be much more in the background, but more effective than I've ever been in my life, because it was said of Merlin in his role as portrayed in John Boorman's Excalibur that he was the bridge between the old pagan mysticism of the Dark Ages, as mankind was then moving in the time of Merlin and Morgana and King Arthur, into the modern scientific and rationalistic age. And as he says in the movie, the old gods, the druid gods, and the rest of them were fading from the scene, and the one god was coming into prominence. It was a time of the change, a major change in the god image. It was a time of flood change. And you know how many times I've told you about the marvelous dreams that have come to me of tidal waves and everything else. I did a tape on it, where dear brothers and sisters in Christ have had great dreams, saying this is a time of tidal change. Great, enormous eruptions from the ocean of God's consciousness, and a time of the change in the God image, which it certainly was from a more polytheistic druid type of uh, time back there in King Arthur and Merlin's day, into the age of rationalism and one God and science. Now we are seeing without any question the end of the age of science and rationalism, which, as I've taught you as faithfully as I know how, is the greatest revolution that has taken place in our revolution-filled lifetimes. We've seen great revolutions like the collapse of communism. We've seen the invasion of space, the man landing on the moon. But nothing is greater than the change from the old rationalistic science to the new quantum mechanics. And as I've told you, books are pouring off the press continually. You can't even keep up with them. Books written by physicists at the lay level so that we can have a grasp on this, and you have many of them on the fresh bibliography, which has been in your hands for a little while now, and I want to underline while I'm thinking about it, be sure and read Jaworski's great book, Synchronicity. Joseph Jaworski's great book, Synchronicity. That is, and many of you have. Thank you for your wonderful, warm-hearted notes of congratulations that have come back to me for recommending the book, because many of you have already been blessed by that wonderful work. And Jaworski is an international lawyer of great fame, and his father, of course, was Leon Jaworski, who was in the Watergate prosecution in Nixon's day. But Joseph Jaworski is a multinational corporate lawyer with Royal Shell Dutch Oil Company. And he has a profound spirituality. And what changed his life completely was one afternoon spent with David Bohm, who is an associate of Albert Einstein, man out of, I think, Princeton, and who just had such a great grasp on the revolutionary things that were changing. And we'll be saying more about oneness and the great one mind. We have the mind of Christ and so on as we go on in the series. But I wanted to stick that in. That's the new magic. That's the new Merlin. That's exactly where you and I can change the world. And I would remind you again of one of my all-time favorite statements, in fact, two of them. Goethe, the beginning and ending of all creative activity is the shaping of the world around us by means of the world that's within us. This is a time of flood change, as George Leonard said in his great book, The Transformation. And the other great statement is from Kazantzakis, the Greek saint, I believe in a world which does not exist. This is Merlin magic now. I believe in a world which does not exist, but by believing in it, I create it. We call non-existent whatever we have not desired with sufficient faith and strength. I'll say it again. I believe in a world which does not exist, but by believing in it, I create it. We call non-existent whatever we have not desired with sufficient strength. I could be summarized in Jesus' great line, according to your faith, be it unto you. Because the new quantum mechanics has to do with the magic of faith, and that's pure Merlinism. And that's why in the emphasis that takes place here, in this change from priesthood, I'm being released from some of my old priestly public duties and persona in order that I may work more effectively behind the scenes in the magic of Merlin quantum mechanics. And that's it pretty much in a line, and I'm going to try and elaborate and amplify that as we go on and study together. But I'm quite thrilled with this because I believe that we're going to see colossal miracles. And by the way, if we weren't going to, Satan would not have tried to kill me by draining the life out of me, which he certainly did. And you cannot imagine what that experience was like. I've never been so weak in my life, physically, mentally, and spiritually, as I was at that time. And it's just like Abraham's experience when something new was to be born through that, our father of faith. In Genesis, the 15th chapter, a deep sleep fell upon him, and a horror of great darkness fell upon him at the time of change and revelation. And Abraham was not only a father, but a prophet, and Merlin was also a prophet, and that's my position in the body of Christ. And I'm going to go into Merlin's role in greater depth as to what I understand about it and what the change is as we go on in our study. Remember that in the end of the letter, my dear friend in San Francisco says, the ex-priest, now a magician, set out to walk with God moment by moment. His every daily moment was preoccupied with God, and no anxious moments were found, but it wasn't a stroll along a rosy path. Now, that's very true, and this is my calling from the Lord as God's solitaire, and I believe that there are some great changes coming in the future that I want to share with you now. But it's much along the lines, and I would recommend to you, and they'll be on future bibliographies. I don't put anything on that I haven't read. So I have a couple of outstanding books, one of which I have read by Thomas Keating, and I think both John Scalzo and Peter Badeau, dear sons of mine spiritually, sent me Keating's books. And there's also not only that, but Thomas Merton. And in both cases, these men were God's solitaires who have had profound influence by being God's loners. And by the way, in the end, saw me living in a stone cabin. And that would further indicate my role in the economy of God. Now, that battle drained a lot of energy out of me. And be reminded that I'm 70 years of age and have been at this for 50 years, so I am deeply grateful to God for a golden Sabbath. I do need a prolonged rest, and I know that many of you have prayed for me and you support and confirm this. Don't stop praying now. We need it more than ever. Thank God these weird, strange symptoms that I've had these months are now beginning to disappear and evaporate. I thank God for that. Just imagine, I was able to sleep 10 and 11 hours at night and take another nap or two during the daytime. That's how serious it was. Now, just to get back to Merlin for a moment here, and in subsequent tapes, I'll be doing further teaching, but I'd like to refresh your mind on a few choice words from uh, Thomas Keating's paper, Unloading the Unconscious. And Father Keating says this, uh, he liberated them from their false selves precisely for some great purpose. Being is everything as you get older in the Lord. It's not so much what you do. And so I certainly will experience a cutting down of my old public responsibilities in priesthood so that I can emphasize the power that I have in the economy of God as a spiritual father and a Merlin. And so Father Keating says this, um, suppose one has reached inner resurrection and transforming union and no longer experiences the turmoil of one's emotions because they've all been transmuted into virtues, and Christ is living in such persons in a remarkable way, and they're aware of their permanent union with Him. And then suppose God should ask them to give that up, that state of enlightenment, and to go back into the kind of trials or worse that they endured before. Their union with God would remain, but it would be completely hidden from them on the psychic level. This is one form of vicarious suffering. The transforming union is not a free ticket to happiness in this world, but for some it may mean a life of complete solitude, like in the stone cabin in the dream, full of loneliness. For others it may mean an active apostolate and so on. But their transformed humanity makes their sufferings of immense value. Now this is the Merlin magic part. Their transformed humanity. And God hasn't taken me through these fires, and many of you, for no reason. You have become a transformer, as I've said many times. That's what a Merlin Melchizedek person is. Their transformed humanity, quoting Father Keating again, makes their sufferings of immense value for the same reason that Jesus, because of his divine dignity, became the Savior of every human being, past, present, and future. And then he goes on to tell about Teresa of Lisieux, which I won't repeat here. But Paul said in Colossians 1, I fill up what is lacking in Christ's suffering. Now, Jesus did not finish all the work. He finished his work. He said, I have finished the work which you gave me to do, to the Father when he was facing the cross. But Paul said, I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's sufferings. for his body, the new humanity, the church. And that's what we are doing. And that's why God develops us into spiritual dynamos and Merlin persons, so that we can use the heavenly magic to bring transformation and to stay the hand of disaster and catastrophe and natural upheaval. You never know how valuable one person is, as my wonderful old mentor, Dr. Edward Edinger, said before he died. One person can make the difference, as in Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. One person can make the difference, in his opinion. And so it's essential that we become what we are, is in our being is the all essential thing, not how much we do for Jesus, passing out tracts or the number of services we attend, especially after we've gotten out of our swaddling clothes and childhood and through our young manhood, as John puts it, and have become, like Abraham's spiritual fathers. Then the mystical experiences that befall us, the deep sleep that falls upon us, as Burma said, consider sleep and so shall you have it all. And when you're in that kind of deep sleep and the devil's draining the life out of you, something new you can bank on it is being born. And new power and new magic is being born out of that. And even though the horror of great darkness fell upon Abraham, Jesus had to sink down into the darkness of the pit and go and preach to the spirits in prison. But he rose, as the old hymn puts it, up from the grave. He arose with a mighty triumph o'er his foes. He arose a victor o'er the dark domain, and he lived forever with us saints to reign. Hallelujah, Christ arose. And that's what it means when Paul prays that I may know him, my life's verse, Philippians 3:10, and the power of his resurrection, and the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable unto his death. By any means I might attain unto the spiritual and moral resurrection out from among the dead, Philippians 3:10 and 11. And if you'll listen, and I hope you will, to Excalibur again, John Boorman's great Hollywood production, you'll find that Merlin, as time goes on in the development of King Arthur and his reign and all, and Arthur then lives through the years and becomes an old man, it's just full of marvelous symbology, which I can't go into here right now. But if you get your eye on the figure of Merlin and his evolution in the movie, you'll find out that he becomes less and less of a public figure until he's finally a confined figure. But then he is loosed with resurrection power in the movie along toward the end in the decisive battles to work his magic. But he does it from behind the scenes, and then he ministers to us in our dreams, is the way that. And of course, in his old age, it's a historic fact that he was imprisoned and he was enchanted, rather, not imprisoned, but enchanted in Whitethorn Hedge with Vivienne, the mistress, the feminine that he loved so much, which in my case would be like my green lady. So I'll be saying more about that and Merlin working his magic from behind the scenes as we go on. That's why Father Keating observes in Unloading the Unconscious, the transforming union should enable one to handle greater trials than those of less evolved Christians. What's the use of building this magnificent spiritual building unless you do something with it? I'm sure God doesn't intend merely to look at these people who are so holy. He wants them to do something. He liberated them from their false selves that was precisely for some great purpose. And that's a great line. That's why God built Paul into the spiritual dynamo that he was, and Abraham, and everyone that we esteem in sacred history. It's why Robert Johnson, in his great book Balancing Heaven and Earth, when he met Carl Jung face to face for the first time as a younger man, Dr. Jung, who was then an older sage fellow, one of God's true prophets, said to Johnson, "You've been claimed for the inner life, and if you'll remain loyal to the inner world, it'll take care of you. That's what you're good for in life, and whatever you need, you've got to learn to accept will turn up for you. Even if you never produce anything of social value, your relationship to the collective unconscious, that is, to the great ocean of God, will justify your reason for being on this earth. And then he went on to tell him it would take all the resources that he, Robert Johnson, could muster just to deal with the forces of the unconscious, which were extremely powerful. And Dr. Jung pointed out a detail at the end of Johnson's dream, and he said this: when you make a circle with your arm, the snake begins to talk with you. That's out of Johnson's dream. And then Jung applies this. He says, do you see this? It's a mandala, a magic circle. Now get this, please. This means that you can survive an otherwise overwhelming experience if you give it form. Do you see? And I want to underline this to you, dear friends. If you're called to this, and many of you are, you must focus on containing these energies or they will destroy you. If you're one of God's transformers, you have to give a lot of energy to wrestling with God, the collective unconscious, polar bear, however you want to put it. Handling the tornadoes, as I've told you about, tape after tape, because if you don't focus on containing these energies, if you're one of God's spiritual dynamos and you're a Melchizedek priest and you're a Merlin person, those energies, which are extremely powerful, can destroy you. So it takes a lot of my energy and strength, as I shared recently with some dear friends, just to go through these wrestling matches in the third basement with a polar bear. Now, remember that you must focus on containing these energies or they can destroy you, especially if you have this kind of calling on your life. Believe me, the devil has the power when he attacks full tilt to drain the life out of you, as he did out of me. It's time to turn the tape over, please. Okay, I'm ready to go on here inside due, and I want to say the first thing is that I am sure enjoying myself here. It's so good to be back in the harness and talking with you again. Secondly, when I turned this tape over, I found out that the devil's still around, and he certainly doesn't want me sharing these things with you because the tape was going to give me trouble. Now, after you spend a long time and high energy putting these things down, you want them to come out right. And I believe I'm going to run back the tape here and make sure it is, because this is a brand new machine. But believe me, this is what I'm good for in this life, as Dr. Jung told Robert Johnson. It's also true of me and many of you. And I'll tell you, the enemy does not want me sharing the things that I know. And I want you to pray more fervently and with greater zeal than you ever have before. And I'll deeply appreciate it and pray God's rich reward upon you for it. Which brings to my mind once again my life's verse, Philippians 3:10-11, that I may know him. And the word is epigenosis in the Greek, deeper and deeper, wider and wider, better and better. That's what develops you into a transformer, into a spiritual dynamo, into a Merlin person, into a Melchizedek priest. And they're very close together, as I've taught you, Melchizedek and Merlin. It's the magic of heaven, that I may know him better and better, deeper and deeper, wider and wider. And that takes your entire commitment all your life and the renewing of your mind, as it says. Put off the old man. Be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on this new man. Put off the old clothing, even at a certain stage in your life, like I've had to do, put off the old priestly garments and put on the new. The new persona that God's giving me is that of a magician, of a Merlin, working more behind the scenes, but nevertheless bringing in the king and bringing the king to full recovery, renewing the king's image. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the new image of God. And it's the resurrection image of the cosmic Christ, who isn't Jesus the Jew seated at the Father's right hand in his own glorified body, but who said, unless I die, I'll only be one Christ. I'll only be one lone grain of wheat, but if I die, I'll bring forth many Christ, what Jung used to call the Christification of many. Paul called it Christ in you, the hope of glory. And he said in Galatians 1, God set me apart from my mother's womb to reveal his son in me. That's your purpose in this life. And as you develop into that kind of a spiritual dynamo, then you fill up what's lacking in the sufferings of Christ. You become a redemptive person. You become a Merlin and a Melchizedek priest, and you have greater influence than you could ever imagine. And someday you'll hear, well done, good and faithful servant, enter thou into the joys of thy Lord. You've been faithful over a few things, now rule over many things. And believe me, we're becoming what we're going to be through eternity. Now, just a few more things, and I'm going to quit because that's plenty to think about and leave plenty of space. I don't know that Nancy will need a lot of space. She doesn't preach too often, but I'm going to leave her some space to tell you some very important plans that are coming up about some of the difficulties that she's had in her realty business, and the perhaps she could mention the removal of Marathon Oil from Cody, Wyoming, which is a terrible shake-up to the town of a little over 8,000 people. But she's had her problems with her work, and I want to tell you about that because she's got some very beautiful insights. And if anybody can do it in my ministry, she's the one that can do it. She's the one that really knows me, knows my materials, has the huge library of back tapes. God's given me dream after dream after dream, saying that many, many more people want to hear my ministry, but they're younger people than the ones I usually minister to. You know, I minister to people, I would say, more in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, even baby boomer types, but the dreams that God's given, building the National Cathedral of the Living God, which I'll be saying more about later, and other great dreams, say that now there are all kinds of younger people who are saying, in fact, in one dream, a young man said, where's the fellow with that interesting message that I once heard spoken? We need to hear it. Now, you can't get it much straighter than that. That means that we need to be able to have Nancy working on the website and being able to get the old tapes available on a broad scale and that kind of thing. And I want her to tell you some of her dreams and visions about that, which thrill me because I don't even know how to turn a computer on, let alone .com anybody. So keep that in mind. Uh, she'll be talking to you here in just a few minutes, but I want to conclude by saying this, that some nice things happened during this time when the devil was trying to kill me. And one of them was I got to go back to Wyoming. I want to give you some big news here in closing, as speedily as I can give it to you. And in September, I took a vacation trip back to Wyoming and stopped in Jackson Hole, and two very favorite spiritual sons, John Vash and John Tobin, met me there. And talking about what I mentioned, you know, as I was closing out the first side of this tape, where Jung told Robert Johnson, you must give attention to containing these powers because they're very powerful, and if you don't, they can destroy you. When you have a special calling on your life, like I do as an intercessor, then you have to give great attention to it, and it takes great energy in order to contain these forces and to understand them and to study them through and to pray them through. And John Vash and John Tobin and I took a ride up into Yellowstone National Park one day. We had 2 wonderful days together in Jackson Hole, my old stomping ground. And on the way back, I spent my time, just because I felt the Lord wanted me to, kind of preaching to those fine guys and telling them just what my ministry was as an intercessor. And at the end, they said, we never realized it cost you so much. Well, it does. There's a cross connected with this kind of thing, and it does take a great deal of energy. And bear in mind, I am 70, and I do need a year of liberty, a golden jubilee. And the odd thing was, we went to Bubba's Beanery for dinner that night, and I was mystified by it myself. But here I am 70, and these fellows are much younger than I am. And they looked totally washed out from our day's trip, and I looked energized. So I guess they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength and mount up with wings as eagles. I don't know what the other explanation of that would be, but they said, you look energized. We looked absolutely tagged out. We never realized what a price you paid to carry on your ministry. So, dear friend, you may be younger than I am as you listen to my voice, and you may know full well that God has his hand on you in a special way, male or female. I'm trying to give you the inside track and a description thereof to the best of my ability and what you might expect, because God needs people like you. And some of us have a special calling. Now, with that in mind, just rejoice greatly, and may God realize his perfect will and purpose in your life. And may you realize his power and blessing in your life. Now, just a little bit more of earth-shaking news, and I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. And we have been in, and we are still in severe financial distress in the ministry. And one of the big reasons is that during this attack, when the devil was trying to drain life not only out of me, but apparently out of the very ministry itself, a couple of our major donors who give substantial money per month fell on evil days themselves financially and could hardly make ends meet. And that means over the last 6 months, a loss of $12,000 just from those two donors alone. We need you to get on the ball with some hilarious, big-time giving until it hurts. Thank God for those of you who do that regularly. But we need some new, regular donors. It's very difficult to survive the loss of that kind of money after 6 months, and it's still not coming back in from those people. They're beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. But it's time for some of the rest of you to cover our tail. If you can possibly do it, the will and plan of God, make it a matter of fervent prayer. We need some big bucks, and then we need some new, regular, consistent donors. Some people join the tape club. They pay their $60 if it's, when we discount it there at the end of the year, or a full 75 and get their 10 tapes over the year and never give another dime. Now, if you're one of those, please pray about expressing your appreciation if you have that kind of appreciation and giving where you're fed. The $60 to $75 barely covers the cost of the production of the tapes. It's not a gift to the ministry in any way, shape, or form. So I'm just going to leave you with that because I'm not going to beg. If God wants the ministry to go on, he needs to cover our tail big time in this time of crisis when Satan has absolutely stomped the hell out of us and nearly drained me of life itself. We need your help. We need it big time, and we need it now. And may God lead and bless and reward you. Now, another piece of big news, and I want you to join me in prayer on this, is this, dear friends. There is a distinct possibility that in the next several months, Vaughn and Lavona, my son and daughter-in-law and little granddaughter Alexis, and myself will be moving back to the area of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Now, that's going to take a colossal miracle, an open door in medicine and other ways for Vaughn to be able to do that, financially and otherwise, but that is the desire of each one of our hearts. And the Lord said, delight yourself in me, and I'll give you the desires of your heart. And I'm feeling that my reasons for being in California are coming to a close after my almost 3 years here. And I just, with everything in me, want to get back to my beloved Wyoming. But I would not go if I couldn't have my wonderful son and daughter-in-law and granddaughter there. So I want you to pray fervently. Will you please do that for me? I love you. I thank you for it. May God bless you. Now, just to clarify, you may say, well, are you going to ever come back east on itinerary? I certainly hope so. The format may change somewhat. We don't know that yet from God. But my plan is to come back in the fall of 2001, next fall, that is. Not next spring, but next fall. And you be praying with me as to any possible format changes. We might do more of a school of life type of thing, or a short-term weekend school of life. And God will make that known when the time comes, but I really feel like I'll be able to get back there a little bit more. If I understand the Lord aright, I'm going to have good health and strength for a good number of years, and I don't hear perfectly, but he's told me this many times. I think I'll last for quite a while, even though I'm 70, and be able to minister fruitfully for a number of years to come. Nevertheless, not my will, but his be done. And I'm going to hope from this time forward to get the tapes out on time and have my energy fully restored. Please pray like a trooper about that. I am tired of being tired and tired of being drained of energy. And I've told you plenty on this tape, and it just overjoys me that I've been able to sit down here And maybe on the next tape, I'll share some of the wonderful letters that you folk have sent. But I want Nancy to have plenty of room to explain what she's got to explain to you. It's very important. Please give her a careful, prayerful hearing. And then after you're done, maybe put the tape aside for a couple of days, but there's lots of meat on here. Listen to it, as so many of you have told me time and again, many times. Listen to the tape many times. It can't possibly sink in unless you get saturated. You'll miss some blessings, and you'll miss some rubies and diamonds and some good jewels if you don't listen to it over and over again. So may God bless, and I hope to be talking with you again in the not too distant future as we finish this year's tape series, and hopefully they'll be coming out a lot more consistently in the time that remains and into the early part of the new year before we start the new series. So God bless you, my Merlin Melchizedek friends, and I hope magic is worked in your lives and you see miracles every day. I love you, and thank you for your prayers. Goodbye for now.
Hi, everyone. I'll just take a couple minutes and give you a little update about what we're doing and what you can look forward to seeing coming out. Um, I am in the process of trying to take all of Bruce's tapes, and we are talking about boxes and boxes and boxes of tape. The entire underneath storage area under my steps is literally filled with all of his tapes, videos, booklets. I mean, everything is there. Uh, Over the years, we had discontinued doing tape lists, as most of you know, and we will shortly, I don't know how quickly I can get all this done, and I'll discuss that with you a little bit more, but we will be re-releasing tape lists. We will be putting a lot of tapes and other items like that in written form. We're also going to be taking the website and really working on that and expanding its usage. Basically, my goal and our goal on this is to give you a lot more of Bruce as he enjoys his Jubilee year. And as I said to him, I said, you have produced so much material here, you could almost take a Jubilee life at this point. But I think that there is a tremendous need for books, and to me, when I even listen to them, they're just as fresh as anything out there. So hopefully, with the use of the website, we will be attracting new supporters, and thank you all and for your support and your much needed support during this time and during some of this transition. One of the reasons why we have held back somewhat on the website, and I shouldn't say somewhat, we have totally held back on it, was I did not anticipate the amount of work that it was going to take to actually do this. We are very much talking about my needing to put in a good 25 hours or more a week just in handling the ministry work. And Bruce wanted me to discuss this with you as it affects all of us. I honestly feel that the further development of the website and the producing extensive tape lists and releasing some of this materials this way will create a very strong, and I'll use a business term, profit center for Bruce. However, it does need to get launched. And the problem that we're in right now is, as you know, Bruce is in a very serious financial crisis, and thank you all for your support for him. But it's also a situation where I cannot afford to do all this work for him without compensation. Obviously, I'm no longer his wife, so don't get compensated that way. We have sat down, Bruce and I have talked about it, and I have agreed to discontinue doing the second job I have, which I have needed to take on, mainly because the real estate market here in Cody has been somewhat soft. And that's not to say that it will always stay soft, but the past couple of years have not been as strong as they have been some other years. I'm very, very thankful for the amount of business that we do have, mainly because we really developed a real market niche as far as getting business from the internet. We are the strongest office, even though it's only just Mike and I, just two of us. We have created the strongest internet presence in Cody. So I know the business is eventually going to be there, but these past couple of years have been very weak. So Bruce will be paying me to get some of this work done. And unfortunately, it's probably going to take, my guess is probably 3 to 4 months before the internet and the tape lists and everything really do start to produce the kind of money to make it, as I said earlier, a profit center. We did want to share this with you, as I know you all are being very, very supportive, and just to let you know that unfortunately this is creating another little strain on the finances here for Bruce and for the ministry. Um, on a very, very positive light, you can look forward to a lot of fun things, those of you that do have internet connection, that we will be doing with the website. It will be an ever-changing site. There will always be new tapes being put on it. You can order directly from the site. We'll probably even do some video on it. Planning a members only section, which would be for those of you who are part of the tape club and all, that we'll have some special things on there. So it's going to be, as I said, a fun thing with a lot of new ideas going on. We also, at this point, although we do have the site, and if you went to drbrucemorgan.com, anyone who's done that knows there's a site there. It has not, however, been submitted to any of the search engines. And those of you who understand anything about the internet know that when we start to do that, it will make it searchable for people that are just out there looking for similar type ministries and that kind of thing. That too will take a lot of work. It's something I feel that I'm very good at. I've proven myself with my own real estate business, and it's a lot of fun, but it is time consuming. So there's a lot going on here. I don't know how long it's going to take me to have some of these things ready. As I said, I honestly feel we're looking at kind of a real crunch situation for maybe 3 to 4 months until it starts to uh, take care of itself. And most certainly, should it prove to not take care of itself, we would obviously disband that kind of time energy. But I would be very surprised if it didn't do anything other than really, really take off and bring new supporters, bring new people into the ministry, and have a new way even for you to share the ministry with other people. We really need you behind us right now. We know it's difficult, and we're going into the holiday season, and it just seems as if so many of you we hear from and we love, that you too are going through very difficult times, and you're definitely in our hearts and in our prayers. And I just know and trust that all of this will turn itself around, and that we can all be enjoying a great time in the future. I'd like to let you know that I'm making myself more to all of you. If you need to call, if you want to order tapes, as I said, I'm not quite ready for all that. I've also restructured a little bit of how I'm handling the real estate business, and how we're in the real estate business, and how I have things set up. And at this point, we have moved all of the office equipment into the house, and so that I can be much more functional as far as handling both ends, both the real estate, as far as phone calls and using the computers and everything else. Everything here is now in one place, and I'm very excited about that. It also makes it easier for me to take care of a house and be a mom still. So if ever you're needing me, if you want to give me a call, you can feel free to do that. The best number to reach me at is 307-527-5757. If I'm busy, I will tell you so. But if you want to call, if you have any suggestions or whatever, just give a call. I'd be delighted to hear from you. Inside with the tape, you'll notice a little note about something called Q checks. I've used it myself, and I find it an interesting way to send a check to somebody. So those of you who like the internet and like your email, if you want to save yourself a stamp as far as sending a donation to Bruce, you can try out Q checks. So that's about all I'm going to talk about right now, and hopefully we're going to see a lot of fun things happening in the future, and may you all have a wonderful holiday, and my love to all of you. Bye for now.